Yeah. Okay. Yep.
It gets weird.
Echoes. Yep.
Can you hear me?
I can. Patrice, hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I always have to adjust my speakers.
Yeah. I always have it turned down. So.
I may put my ears in anyways because I can hear myself talking. You.
Hello, Wendy.
Good morning.
And Brenda's here.
Morning, Don.
Good morning, Brenda. There it is. Morning, Terrence. Morning, Will.
Hello.
Terrence.
Hey, how's it going?
Okay. What are we waiting for? Most up there's Dave. Well, Dave, Michael.
Hey, Don. Hi, everyone.
Morning.
Hello.
I think Mike Tucker was. Don't know. Okay, so Ron wasn't sure. He had a question mark next to his name whether he was going to be able to make it today. Donal and Ray did not answer, so I don't think they will be here. So I think everyone else. What do we have? Oh, there's Mike now. Okay. Hello, Mike. Get my meeting notes up here. All right, so everyone that said they were going to be here is online, so we can get started. Two. So did everybody get a chance to look at the minutes that I sent out? We can go through that formality. Anybody want to motion to accept the minutes?
I'll move.
Dave, seconded by,
I'll second.
who was that, Wendy?
Yep.
Okay, all approve? Anybody against? Okay, passed unanimously, thank you. So our agenda today, I'm going through the DEC contract. We made contact with our DEC rep, Nuna Nur. Just to let you know, it took a week and 2 emails before I got a response to one of my questions. So, and her response, because of that, said, just to quote her, our priorities have changed recently as we were trying to get older contracts executed before they are expiring in the coming few months. So, you know, by the sounds of it, they are very busy over there at DEC, you know, reviewing and getting some of these contracts approved. So she urged us to send in an updated work plan and a budget, which I did. So just to get us in the queue, in the lineup, so that we're not, you know, missing any time. So I did that. I sent that in, even though I had a couple of questions about it. She said to submit it, send it in anyway. So I did that. So, and she will, the next step is she's going to review those 2 documents. She's going to add in some milestones and some deliverables at certain points in our work plan, then send it back to us, probably with some questions for us to do some edits, provide a little more information. And so mentioned by her a number of times, and in the application process, it is, they say this is a back and forth process to get this contract approved. I don't know how many back and forth it's going to take. I'm going to try to keep it to a minimum because, you know, we want to get the ball rolling here. But just to let you know that's, you know, that is part of the process. Is a little back and forth with this, getting this contract written up and approved by both sides. One thing that one of my questions was, and Patrice brought this up too, was elected officials do not qualify for volunteer time, right? So obviously that's, you know, Brenda, Ron, Denal, who are on this committee. We can't, you know, your time is valuable, obviously, but we can't count that towards the volunteer match in-kind services. The question though is about Will's time. You know, Will, you're an elected official at the local level, not at the county level. And we also had Steve Powers, who had volunteered to do some volunteer work for us, who's also elected official for New Lebanon. That was my question from Una. I don't know. She didn't have an answer for me immediately. She was going to ask her superior, but she recommended we send in the work plan and budget anyway, and she would get that answered soon. So, you know, we may not be able to count, you know, the time as in-kind services towards the volunteer part of it. Dave, you had to.
Yeah, I mean, logic would, I'm sure everyone's thinking the same thing, dictate that it's the capacity you're in and the role you're playing. And so for a supervisor, maybe it is that they are playing the role of supervisor in advising and guiding this process. But I wouldn't imagine for Will, for example, I mean, he's got expertise in agriculture, and that's why and climate and other things. And that's why he's in this group as a member of the community. I don't think it's his membership on the board in Livingston. Same for Steve Powers. So Steve might be a little different. I don't know, but so I would hope we would be able to not only include the in-kind credit for their work, but also arguably at a higher rate than an average volunteer.
Yes, but there's,
We'll see.
yes, it's up, that's not our decision to make though, Dave. I mean, it is DEC's decision, and Muna didn't know, you know, my direct contact didn't have an answer for that. She was gonna ask her superior.
I'm just making an argument.
Yeah.
I'm not concluding, you know, I'm just saying like the way we frame it may help our position. As opposed to asking an open question.
Yeah.
Saying it more with a, you know, we're going to present these people not as elected officials, but as farm climate expert,
Oh, yeah.
renewable energy, you know, expert, and Steve and other things like that. Maybe that's overstating it a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah, but I think it's going to cause a problem with our in-kind, you know, our total numbers, because we can easily, you know, staff time will far outpace, you know, the volunteer in-kind service. So it's not a problem coming up with that $30,000 worth of match time.
Okay.
It's just a matter of, you know, do we count it? Can we count it or not as part of the match? And I don't think that's going to be a, you know.
No, that sounds good. I just remember
Yeah.
earlier we were concerned about
Yeah.
meeting that amount. So if that's not,
Yeah. We'll get the answer from DEC and let's see, you know, yes or no. And that's, you know, I don't think there's any, yeah, we'll find
Cool.
out. And Terrence, you had a question?
Actually, I had made a note to check in with you because I track this time and I can easily run reports. So I just want you to know that. I don't know if you're tracking my time, if that's helpful, but whenever it is helpful, I can just let you know how many of my hours are going towards this committee.
Yeah, that was actually my next item here was tracking time. So I can track time when we have meetings. You know, I can see you're all on here, and I have, you know, start and end times and tracking how much time we're putting into these things and any other like group activities that I know you've attended, but things that you do on your own, you know, if you're reviewing documents or providing some feedback. And I did ask this, and the response was, you know, for personnel and volunteer time, you must have time logs along with a brief description of tasks performed by individuals that are working on the project. So I'm going to set up a spreadsheet with all of your names in it. I can plug in the meeting, you know, the meeting dates, meeting times, and what we discussed. But anything you do on your own, if you just send me an email and tell me, you know, it helps if it's like a specific date, specific time, and exactly what you did. All right, because they
How
can
many hours do we need collectively?
I think I put you all down for 30 hours total over the entire 2-year span of the project. You know, I'm sure some of you are going to put more hours in and some less. So it's, you know, so if we have, you know, if we meet like once a month, which may be a lot, that's 24 hours right there, Mike. You know, I don't think we are going to meet every single month once we get the ball rolling, but you know, I'm just using that as a rough figure. But anything, you know, any time that you take reviewing documents, you know, writing up an email, sending me some feedback, just kind of document that if you can, so we can keep track of it as much as possible.
Don, did you say how you want us to communicate that time to you?
Yeah, just the email is fine. I'll have a master spreadsheet that I'll plug that into.
Okay.
Yeah, you can just send me an email with dates, times, what you did, and I can keep track of that. Wendy, you had a question too?
Well, I was just wondering if it would be easier if you sent us a spreadsheet log of like what you want, time log with the time, the date, and all of that information. And if we filled that out and then maybe sent it to you quarterly, and then you're getting, instead of just us randomly emailing you where it might not be seen. I don't know. I'm just thinking project wise and keeping track of everyone's location. If we're all filling out the same sheet over the course of maybe submitting them quarterly, and then we're sending them to you and it shows all of the hours, you can input it on your master document.
Yeah, I could probably do like a Google form if that's easier for you. You know, that includes, you know, date, time, what you did, and then we can track that. So I can do that too. Yeah. Yep. A Google form. That sound good, Wendy?
Yeah,
What you're looking
I
for?
was just thinking logistically, you know, trying to keep track of this group, and the time that we're putting in, that it might just be easier if we're not inundating you with emails on a weekly basis with how many hours we might
Yeah.
be putting towards
Yeah.
something. We
Well-
are submitting it to you.
Yeah, you can send it in once a month or something. That's fine too. You don't have to send it immediately after you perform any certain task, but or I can send out maybe a reminder email once a month. Let me know, you know, fill out your Google form and let me know what you did. Okay, I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible too, and that seems simple to me. All right, and then plus I get, you know, I can count my hours for doing that work, assembling. So, kind of snowballs. So yeah. I'll set up some kind of a system that makes it easy for me. Okay. So let's see. Next item was our RFP scope of work. I sent everybody out the our next draft of the RFP. Dave, you sent in some significant edits to that. I pretty much accepted them all, incorporated that into the scope. Supervisor Knott had a little discussion with me. He wanted to make sure that the RFP said a few things specifically about how we prioritize the actions that we're going to include in the final document. So I made sure that was outlined in the scope. It'll be Marissa from Central Services, who is really going to be sort of our lead contact within the county for getting this RFP written according to, you know, county standard and sending it out to publishing it to different places. And so I've incorporated quite a bit of additional text based on a discussion that Patrice and I had with her. Make sure it included everything that the county needed. I added a consultant qualifications section, you know, so they can supply a little bio of whoever it is that's going to be working on the plan. Also, a little note that they are free to propose changes to the scope if they wanted to, based on, you know, what they might recommend that we do. Let's see, Dave, you had a question, Dave?
Yeah, I like what you added that Ron put in. I think it's under number 5. Just prioritize and ranking. That's good.
Yeah.
That's smart. But my question is on number 3 of the scope of services on page 4. And I, you know, I did add edits, but I feel like, you know, once you see it with everything cleaned up, you start seeing other things. This is the section that identifies greenhouse gas reduction strategies, goals, and reduction targets for county operations. Then the next section is for the broader community.
Mm-hmm.
The way it's organized here, we've got bullet point B is for facilities and buildings. Bullet point C is for transportation. And bullet point D is kind of a grab bag of other stuff. Like it's solid waste, IT infrastructure. That's interesting.
Yeah, that's kind of a holdover from the template that I use. I think it was from Saratoga Springs. I wasn't sure if we really needed to break that out into those different sections or not.
Well, no, I think we do. It just may not be enough, is my point. I mean, it's the way it's organized. I don't know. I haven't written one of these. I've read some of them, and there are more categories. And so maybe we want to look back at some of the other examples as to how these because this is going to structure a lot of the work. You know,
Yeah.
what are the sectors that we're going to have this presented to us in? And it should flow, like the greenhouse gas inventory itself is structured by sector, right?
Yeah.
And so the recommendations should parallel that. However, we want to have that written, and if we're going to write it like this, and this is different, and I assume it is, than how the CDRPC greenhouse gas inventory is being structured, maybe we should take a look at that. I'm happy to do that after. Just take a quick look at some examples and the greenhouse gas inventory, because we're going to want that to be pretty consistent. I think both at the county level and the government and the community level. And then maybe we can just get it out to people to take a look if they have any thoughts.
Yeah, okay. And Terrence, did you have a Terrence?
Yeah, actually, but I'm just thinking of what Dave just said though, and I'm wondering if that bullet point, if we don't want to leave that kind of as a catch-all. I think the way the proposal kind of lays it out is that there's going to be some amount of work with the consultant and community feedback to identify what those might be. So I don't know if we want to have an exhaustive list in here as the scope of work, but I was wondering, with the scope of work, do we want to give any parameters on it, kind of like we have under the qualifications, where it's like either, you know, not to exceed so many points, or to point out like kind of that we're looking for something in a PDF format that's,
Yeah,
so kind of in that, just as like a procedural thing in that opening scope of services. And yeah, also I didn't send them to you yet, but I can send you some comments that I also have.
yeah, okay. Yeah, much, you know, that first one where we're asking for, you know, consultant qualifications, that's just because, just from my experience, submitting some of these proposals, some firms will send you a binder full of, you know, every, you know, pages and pages and pages of, you know, past projects they've worked on, and it just gets kind of overwhelming. So that's the reason we kind of limit it to like a 10-page consultant, you know, qualification section. But I mean, the proposal is kind of the meat of what we're really going to be looking at. So I don't know, not sure what kind of parameters we could set on that, you know, limits to what we, I mean, I think, you know, the one thing I do like is, and again, I'm looking at this from somebody who's responded to a lot of these, is the ability to add and embellish some of the things that we list here. You know, maybe they've done these before. Hopefully they've done some of these before, and they may have some ideas that we haven't thought about. You know, how does,
Yeah, and that makes me think, I did wonder too, if we wanted to be as detailed in general with the scope of services, or if like we wanted to,
right,
you know, leave some of those smaller bullets off as something for the proposal to identify or not identify.
Yeah, it is kind of a balancing act there. You know, I mean, we want to present the fact that we know what we're talking about and we know what we want to get, but also let the consultant provide us with, because we're going to be evaluating these based on what they're telling us. You know, it's not going to be you know, it's not like we're taking the lowest bidder on this. You know, they're all going to come in within within $5,000 of $90,000. You know, that's just the way it happens. We're going to let them know that we have $90,000 to spend, and our evaluation is going to be based on, you know, what are their sort of unique ideas? Can they take this scope and sort of incorporate some new things that maybe we haven't thought about, or things that they've discovered based on some of their past experiences. You know, that's kind of what we're going to be evaluating.
Can the money be used for anything else where we could, hold back 20 grand and use it for something to complement the project and get the consultant for the same price? Because that's what they know we have to spend.
Yeah, no, not really, Mike. I mean, that's kind of what we've been.
You hate to let them just think that because you have $90,000, they're gonna give you $90,000 worth of work, but
Yeah, yeah. But yeah,
Well, I
that's
think
kind
that
of what
may-
we've been focused on from the beginning, right from when we submitted the
I understand.
application, that's what we were going to spend this money was on consultant services.
I did wonder though, if we wanted to solicit in the scope of proposals, how they would use that budget. So for things like
Oh, yeah,
community
no, yeah,
engagement.
yeah, right. So how much is this item going to cost? How much is, how much time are you going to spend on certain aspects? So that's maybe a good idea. I could probably add something in there. Like a cost, not a total cost, but a cost breakdown of the different elements that we have on our scope. Okay. I don't think that's in there yet. Make a note of that. Just go. Yeah. Okay. Brenda, you had a question? Or comment?
I believe I understood in the first meeting that we're working in a niche market here in terms of finding a consultant. Not a lot of consultants do this kind of work. So
Mhm.
I'm just wondering if we've asked enough questions to identify someone with experience with exactly what we want to have done within that group of consultants. I realize that we don't entirely understand the scope of work, that the scope of work will become more apparent as we move through the process. But I'm just wondering if we've asked the right questions to identify the best fit.
Mhm. Okay, and Wendy,
And I can't answer that question. That's the reason I'm
yeah, I'm gonna
asking.
make a note. I'll make a note of that, and I'll look through it. I think some of that will come out with the the list of qualifications, list of their past projects, and I have this note a little bit later on in the meeting, but I assume we're going to do interviews with some of these folks. We'll probably whittle it down to a few, and so we're going to have to come up with a list of questions for them, so we have to kind of keep that in mind too. When it comes to interview time, what are we going to ask these folks to help them stand out from the others, or identify the ones that kind of stand out from the others? Wendy, you had a question?
So my apologies if this has already been spoken about previously and I didn't hear, but is there a particular reason why you're saying how much is being allocated? Is it because you want to make sure that you have people responding to the bid and not going over that, or?
Yes. In my my experience with these kinds of planning projects, yes, because you might get it makes it easier for the consultant to respond to the proposal. They know what we have to spend. They're not gonna waste time. Some of these consultants may think, well, I can't do a cap for less than $120,000. So that's what I'm going to propose. And they're going to spend a month putting together a proposal for $120,000, and we're going to see it. The first thing we're going to do is set that one aside. We don't want it. So they've wasted their time. Right. So, and again, as somebody who's responded to these proposals, I love it when they tell us what they have to spend. Because that takes a big burden off of me. I know how much you're willing to spend. If it's not, a lot of times it's not enough. If we were going to send out a proposal and we didn't let the consultant know that, well, we have only got 40 grand to spend on this big laundry list of items we want, and we're going to get nobody that's acceptable. So I think it's essential that we let them know how much money we have to spend. It's not like we're going for the lowest bidder. It's
Right, which I
like
guess is why I was asking that question. But then I would definitely what Terrence had mentioned about how they're going to be allocating those funds. I think that would be really important in
Right.
this case then.
Yeah,
sure.
I don't think that's in there, but I will definitely put a, ask that when they respond, to each of these sections, how much time do you foresee time and money putting it, what's this piece going to cost us? What's the next piece going to cost us when it comes to writing the plan? How much is that going to cost us? So then we'll know how much effort they're putting into each part of it too. So, if we get one consultant that's putting half of the budget into just writing the plan versus another consultant who's going to put, 75% of the budget into public outreach and talking to the staff, that's in my view, that's what I want the consultant to put their time and effort into. So yes, that's a good question, good comment. I'll make sure that's included in the RFP for sure. Dave, you're next.
Don, on this point, I agree with Terrence and Wendy, and I don't think we should just assume they're going to use the whole amount, but can we use language like not to exceed 90,000? And then obviously ask them to document, and then they can be competitive in that case in cost as well as in their proposals. So they're thinking about, well, I'm not going to exceed it, but I'm going to impress them as I'm going to come in a little below that.
Oh, they could, yeah.
There's no point in just assuming everyone that takes this will get everything, and maybe they will. I mean, if they're smart, they're going to spend every last dime and spend it really well. But then it gives us another point to evaluate the proposals on how they're spending the money, not just what they're proposing to do, like what you just said. One other question on the deliverables. Do we want just a PDF report, or do we actually want a website or web materials? Do we want a presentation? Do we want any kind of blogs? Do we want articles? Do we want social media? There's a lot more product, I think, than a PDF. And then the second aspect of that question is, how will they use social media as part of their outreach? I think that's more for us to evaluate when we get down that line. I don't think we need to put that in there, but how are they going to really reach people? That's always a challenge. And I think a lot of these things are not always using all the channels available to us these days. So that's a point of evaluation we can look at later.
Yeah.
But in terms of deliverables, I think we may want to expand what we're looking for so that we're signaling to them that they should be creative in terms of, other, or maybe not creative, but I could see the use of web materials, of presentation materials, very useful. And as opposed to us coming up with, even more useful than the PDF document, which we need that as a baseline, but like ultimately very few people will read that. But what other kind of presentation materials or communication materials or do we need, just first time really thinking about that, but I think we should include some of that in here.
Yep. Okay. And DEC is going to want to see certain deliverables, which is why I haven't included all of them yet. But they're going to want to see certain, and then I'm sure they're going to want them in written PDF form. But yeah, that's a
of course we need to comply with
yeah.
funder, but I'm talking about the efficacy of this effort. I'm talking about, like, ultimately at the end of the day, most people, 99.9% may actually open up the PDF, but we might have a good chance of getting more people using. I remember when the what was that, the NRI that was done, there were all sorts of like web components to that, which I've gone to, which are actually useful. The maps are available and they're not just pouring over through a PDF. So I think we want this to be a living document and a resource. So we should think about how we want to make it that way for the public, for government officials or departments.
Okay. Terrence, you're up next.
Yeah, thanks. I think to that point, and this is something I've kind of picked up because CLC is working with a DEC grant for our DEC, but we're working through a New York State grant for our countywide strategy. And a couple of lessons from that. I think that's right. Like the grant is paying up to a certain point, or the grant has certain deliverables. That doesn't mean we can't ask for more from the consultant. And
Right.
asking the consultant to work with the CAP committee or the climate smart communities to come up with a sort of like implementation strategy in addition to the plan, I think is a great idea.
Mhm.
I was thinking though that and I wondered this as I was reading the RFP, it's not totally clear to me what we're asking for from the community engagement, that initial community engagement. I think there's a second phase of community engagement once there are policy recommendations that we can, run through different community groups before it becomes part of the plan. But I wasn't totally sure what we're asking for them to do with the community as that initial phase. And if they're not clear with that, I'm not sure how they would put that into their proposal.
Yeah, I think to that point, Terrence, 7C is it could be elaborated on. Maybe we want to do that. I think that's the area. After DEC comments are incorporated, the draft CAP will be posted to the county's website for review by local officials, advisory agencies, and citizens, along with a form to submit comments. Comments will also be solicited at a public hearing. The project team and consultant will review and take into consideration, blah, blah, blah. So maybe we want to beef that up. Is that what you're saying?
Or I think even like in the kind of project overview and then in the strategy, it seems like there's community engagement from the outset, and then community engagement once there are kind of results to go to vet through the community stakeholders. But like it describes it as like a stakeholder driven process. And then I just honestly wasn't really sure what we were looking for. It feels like we have a lot of the parameters of what we're looking to accomplish, and I don't know how
Yeah,
much.
well, the first step is it says, is come up with a community engagement strategy, but that strategy is for the entire length of the plan. It's not just at
Okay.
the beginning. It's sort of, so I think, if we want to emphasize that the strategy is going to be for the entire, 18 months of the project, including, at the end so yes. So the first thing we're going to come up with is a sort of written document that outlines our communication strategy. And it will, it's going to cover, it's not just the initial like kickoff meeting and let's find out who does what and where, sort of thing, and make a list. But it's going to include additional steps along the way where we're going to reach out to the community for their input, and during the process and at the end when it comes to adopting and editing the plan. Well, how do we do that? So yeah, I can add a few lines that
Or it might be worth us
that.
just like thinking through as a group, I guess, because when with this countywide conservation plan, we did kind of set expectations, like so many in-person meetings prior to the report, so many once the report's prepared, or like just what that expectation would be from them. And I think that's kind of open to us to define.
Yeah, I think that's, I think you're right. Beefing that out, Don, building that out 1B, talking about, this is a process that we want to hear, how you would engage people throughout the process. But I think also how do we want to communicate with people? At what points do we want their input? And how do we think stakeholders will want to engage? Like, we don't want to over engage people and dilute the whole thing.
Yeah.
We want to choose key points, but I think there is something in the middle that we might be missing if we're not careful. There's an initial outreach to kind of brainstorm and introduce this to people and what it is, and describe why we're doing it, and then to start conversations and maybe seed the discussion. But then there's maybe a second phase as we're developing, before we get too far into it, to really make sure we're not missing anything major before things are set, and before it solidifies, or make sure that we understand perspectives from broad stakeholder stakeholders in the community before we solidify those things. That might be helpful. I don't know where exactly, I don't know how to phrase that, but I think you're right, Terrence. If it's stakeholder driven, and I don't know if we're going to, you know, if we've said that, if we're saying that, and those are loaded terms that mean different things to different people. But I mean, we've said all along that we really want this to be distinct in that we truly and genuinely engage as much as we can in a meaningful way with the broadest relevant stakeholders. That also means a lot of different things to different people. So I just think emphasizing it as a very important part of what we're looking for in the proposals without overly describing what we're looking for will bring in probably a diverse range of ideas, which will be helpful in their own right and help us evaluate, distinguish the proposals.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Wendy? Yep.
Hey, John, in the project overview, would it be beneficial to state that we are working through a grant process set forth, the guidelines set forth by, is it DEC? Is that where the grant's coming from? Or
yeah.
nicer? Yeah. So I think that you really, you know, I know that you're saying in funding through grants and an annual budget, but I think a lot of the people that or companies that will respond to this, many of them probably have worked on projects also through New York State DEC guidelines. And so I think it might be prudent to stick that in there because there are deliverables that we have to follow through the grant process that aren't necessarily written down in this document.
Yep. Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I'm kind of waiting for some feedback from DEC with the work plan and budget, because they will add those deliverables in the work plan and budget, and then I can take those and incorporate them into this scope of work too to make sure that they're in there too. But yeah, I can add a couple of lines to the initial project overview that makes sure that they know we are working with DEC on this. Yeah, if it's not there. Yeah. Okay, Terrence. Yeah.
And just as to add to that, I think if it goes into the qualifications, calling out like, you know, brief project history and description from the team, including any previous climate action plans, to Brenda's point, and work with New York State grants. I think that's helpful to know how familiar they are with New York State grant process, which is notoriously frustrating. Yeah.
Okay. All right, all great stuff. Thanks. So where do we leave off here? Consultant. Cost proposal, we talked about that. I think the evaluation criteria I think that's the last sort of big thing that we have to decide upon. And again, I just copied and pasted this out of a couple of other RFPs that I had looked at. So, you know, I don't know if we want to do this today at this meeting, or, you know, we can do both. I mean, if we want to take a quick look at it, what we have in there. But I think that's where that's really where we want to make sure that we're doing a good job. Okay. Because it is, again, talking to Marissa, a lot of these state contracts, they really want to have sort of an itemized event. How are you going to measure the quality of the proposal? And they want some kind of a point system, either percentage or number of points that we're going to use that makes it as objective as possible, that we have chosen the proper consultant to do this work.
Right. Don, I would change the first bullet. I mean, if we're going to take feedback now, I would, I don't see CAP in here. Like, we need experience with climate action plans specifically. And it could also include climate mitigation and adaptation planning, although adaptation isn't really a part of this. So we may want to just remove that. Just say climate action plans and climate mitigation strategies or programs or something like that, just so it's in there.
Yep.
And I think that's pretty high. Maybe that's a higher rank of weight, but I haven't really thought through all the weighting.
Yeah, yep. But I think it's, this is really where, we're going to get proposals back, regardless of what, our scope is that we've laid out, and they may be, open to some adjustments by the consultant, but it's, it's really how we're going to evaluate these proposals when we get them. Well, what are we going to, what are we really looking for, and how do we measure that?
Right. I might include the word community in the second bullet, previous experience with communications and engagement strategies, community outreach, something like that, because, communications and engagement can be very remote and distant and not in person and not really embedded in the community. I don't know if there's a better way to write that, but, we're really, stakeholder is a word that is not here. Diversity is not, I don't mean like DEI diversity, I mean like diverse array of stakeholders covering the gamut of representing people in our community.
When we say quality of proposed strategies and deliverables, that's subjective. How do we measure that? I mean, I can't think of a better word, but I'm just trying to understand how we would manage that.
Proposed, quality of proposed strategy.
David, you're always the person that can answer that. When I ask that kind of question, you're generally the person that jumps in with an answer.
It's a good, I mean, some of this has to be qualitative, right? I mean, by nature, subjective. That's why we're a group. We're going to vote on this together. So I think it's hard to get around that. But I don't know what proposed strategies is a little vague to me. Deliverables is not really vague, but proposed strategies for how they're going to do the community outreach, or strategies for actual climate mitigation. I don't think it's the latter, because they're not gonna propose detailed strategies. They're going to develop those, but it's really strategies for developing the strategies. Maybe we can flesh that out a little more, and I can think about it that line.
Okay.
Just from a high level, is there anything there that seems to be missing? Anything that's not there? I'm sorry, Will, I didn't mean to jump ahead of you.
No, that's okay. I'm just piling on the wordsmithing here. Under 150 points, I think maybe we want to say demonstrated knowledge of the unique issues facing the Hudson Valley region and our rural communities, rather than somebody just going to Wikipedia and having a lot of knowledge about the Hudson Valley. I think we want to just connect that we're looking for issues, strategies, climate budgets that are relevant to the Hudson Valley, rather than just a familiarity with the Hudson Valley or previous work experience on tangential projects in the Hudson Valley.
Yep. Okay. Yeah.
I would change the budget item, the third to the last, reflective of our previous conversation. We're not trying to, this is overall value of the proposals, itemized tasks that fit within the project budget. I would rewrite that to be something like quality of the proposed budget and use of resources or something along those lines. So we're like really scrutinizing their budget and pointing that out, that we want to see how you're proposing to, what you're going to be spending the money on in buckets and how that fits with your proposal.
Yep. Okay. Right. All great ideas. Did we cover that? Oh, who else we got? Terrence? Yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to also say if there could be a line in there probably for like strategy implementation, or so that we're giving some points to the proposals that do incorporate going beyond just the grant plan and how we will use it.
Okay.
Don,
yeah.
or everyone, what the second to last point, ability to provide return on investment and other detailed analytics surrounding project success. Are we talking there about ROI on like the cost benefit? Are we talking about a cost benefit analysis of the strategies? If so, we really want to flesh that out. If that's really something we're looking for. I'm not sure that's what this meant here. I don't really, this is kind of, it doesn't seem to make sense to me what we're actually for.
Actually, I know this was a bit of a copy and paste, Dave, and to be honest, I'm not sure what that line means when I read it. So it's a little, yeah.
So what do we want to, do we want to, are we, I think, how do we measure impact is always a question with these things. How do we measure, that's really metrics for determining impact, efficacy. I don't know. Are we talking about how effective have we reached the community in our stakeholder efforts? How metrics that we can use to assess progress after the plan is, for implementation. Is that what we're after here? They're all good ideas. I'm not sure they're all good ideas, but they're things we may want to highlight.
Ron has entered the meeting.
Hi, Ron.
Yeah, that's that line definitely needs some work. I'll take a hard look at that.
So Don, you're gonna incorporate this feedback and then send another draft out for us to kind of all look at? Okay, great. So then we'll have another chance to doodle on this.
Yep, for sure.
And just in terms of process, before the RFP can be issued, the contract has to be signed, correct?
I don't think the county is not going to send out an RFP until the contract is signed. Pretty sure that's their policy. Yes, yeah.
And how are we in terms of our initial timeline?
Well, that is the next thing on the agenda here. Is I sent out put together a draft CAP project timeline that's kind of in two different sections here of what are we working on now to get the contract signed and RFP out, and that's really basically the first page of that project timeline, and then from there it is actually performing all the tasks here. So again, this is just a draft. Again, I don't have the list of deliverables that DEC is going to require from us yet. I mean, I have a pretty good idea just from looking at other CAPs, what kind of documents they're going to want. But I don't have it directly from them yet for this particular project. But it's quite a timeline just to get the consultant hired, if you'll notice. You know, and I went through this, you know, we talked about this quite extensively. Patrice and I went over it with Marissa, you know, what the county is going to, you know, what the process is for getting an RFP written up, published, put out, sent out. We have to provide some time for consultants to ask questions. We have to respond to those questions. We have, you know, so it is time intensive. Okay, it's going to take some time before we even get to the point where we're hiring a consultant. Dave, you had a question?
Yeah, it is challenging to
Mhm.
move these things fast, I know. It's like a year basically before we
Yeah.
hire the person.
Yeah.
So that's a tough pill to swallow, but it's just the reality of it. You know, we're moving through DEC, and the government operations process takes a while. But then it looks like you're saying about 18 months or maybe a little less, April 2027 is, you know, final adopt. So you're pushing from an 18 to 24. I mean, total with our year of pre-work, it's definitely over 24 months, but we're not giving the consultant and the process, we're giving them a little over a year, which is a little concerning. And I'm concerned both that it's going to be 2027 before we have something. And I'm also concerned whether that's, you know, enough time actually when they actually start in January of 2026 or somewhere around that time. Can they get that done in a year? And I think we should really aim for a tight timeline, understanding it might slip a little. So maybe this is reasonable, but that's just a question. I don't really have a thought on it. I haven't done one of these, and you know. But the second question is, when we're finished in April of 2027, we'll be relying on 2022 greenhouse gas inventory data, which might feel a little stale at that point. So I wonder if we want to allocate some of the budget to updating, you know, just getting CDRPC to update, do like a flash update of the data. That might be a lot of work that we can't do. It's not done in a flash, but I don't know how often they updated it 10 years after the first one. So we're probably in the middle of a cycle, but I'm not sure how to deal with that. Maybe it's just what it is.
Yeah. As far as the consultant timeline, and this is really just an internal for us. In the RFP, I think we're just asking for like an 18 to 24 month process. And and I think part of our evaluation is maybe that timeline that the consultant provides to us, you know, give us your ideas about how much time it's going to take for each of these tasks, and where, you know, where is the final endpoint 18 months from when you start. I think that's kind of up to them, and sort of our evaluation of, does that fit in with what we're looking for as far as what they're doing. So that's pretty flexible, I think. I mean, I know it's
Makes sense.
I condensed their part down, but this isn't really something that we're going to show the consultant about what we're expecting. It was just my estimate of what it was going to take.
But I think we're going to miss the June BOS because so that's going to already put us out to July, maybe August, given the influx, the availability of DEC. That's the big unknown, right?
Yeah. Well, the June.
It says allow the chairman to sign the contract with DEC. We don't.
Yes, that doesn't mean that the contract's going to be ready to sign, though. I don't.
Right. That's my point.
Yeah. Right.
And if we're saying that issuing the RFP is contingent on signing the contract, that's where we start to lose momentum or lose time.
Yeah. So that's why it's going to take until November, December before we actually get the contract with the consultant signed, right? And honestly, that's
optimistic.
But that's not a bad, you know, because I've been talking to a few consultants. You know, I have some consultant friends that are in there, and they're booked solid anyway. So most of them are not looking to start anything new this year. They're all looking for 2026. All right. That's when they're starting to see openings in their schedule. They're not going to be able to start this project before that anyway. And again, from my experience, January, February is like the ideal time to start a plan when we're looking for public engagement. You don't want to start it November, December. Those are 2 wasted months right off the bat when it comes to planning and trying to provide some kind of public outreach. Nobody shows up for those. It's impossible to get anything scheduled. So January, February is really, I think, the ideal time to start a plan. This schedule fits in with that. If we can get a consultant contract signed before November, December, I think that's good. I think we can probably do that. Right.
No, I agree with those concerns, but I mean, I accept everything that you told us, but I think, keeping it moving, getting to that point.
Oh, yeah.
And I agree with you. The important thing is for us to get in the queue for 2026. So we have to do certain things to get in the queue.
Yep. And what was your you had another question?
I've lost it.
I
Doesn't
lost
matter.
Okay.
Eric has got his hand up.
Oh, Terrence, you had a question?
Yeah, so just a couple of things. One, I think, yeah, and we can keep our momentum probably with, what's going on with the current inventories and, Jen's ag emissions work. And then just noting that we'd have the contract before the RFP goes out. So this timeline will be updated once we have that contract and things are a little more established.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
From our experience with the DC grant, the contract was the most frustrating part, and without a timeline, really, it was hard to get moving. So acknowledging that, and wondering if in the timeline we should include prior to interviews running names by DEC, because I think earlier in the proposal it explains like DEC has to approve anybody, so we might as well get that out of the way before we interview folks. If they will review that list.
Terrence, is it like some of the CEC stuff? Could we ask for a list of approved contractors or a list of vendors they've worked with? Could we work it the other way? Because that might also add to our outreach for proposals if they have a pre-approved list. I'm not suggesting that we would stick with that list, but I know with the climate smart stuff, it really primed the pump to have a list to start from.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't heard anything about any kind of a pre-approved list. They might have a list of consultants that they
Have worked with.
Yes. So that might, yeah. So we can certainly ask that. And another, before this thought loses my mind. DEC, one of the things that I've seen in the contract is that they want to be made aware of all the meetings that we hold. So we should probably, start communicating with Muna, my contact at DEC, that we are having these meetings. And do we want to? I also noticed they include Tara, CC Tara on all of their communications. So might we want to ask Tara to invite her into some of these meetings, or all of, just add her to the list. That she might have some insight. I'm sure she does have some insight on a lot of the things that we're talking about. So everyone okay with that? If I ask Tara to
yeah, of course. Tara's always a good addition. I know we're running out of time. I just wanted to one more thing say, maybe we on our end can create some deadlines for RFP completion, just so we're ready to go. That helps if we know it's just kind of dragging out. Also, the subcommittee of the CSC task force can get an update on where CDRPC is with its greenhouse gas inventory, and if it's finalized and when it's going to be finalized, just kind of follow that thread through. We've got the government operations greenhouse gas inventory that Don and planning is working on. So what's the timeline for that? We don't need it finished, but are there any foreseeable impediments, or how can we make sure we have the latest information when we get going, or any other comments? And then the land use piece with forests and with ag, are there any steps we should take to help tee that up for this consultant between now and when they start? Those are all things in our, in our control, and we could, and they could hold us up later down the line.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping that we can have this, the contract with DEC and our RFP, our part of the RFP input done by late June. That's sort of my goal, to have that all done. And then early July is having a complete RFP ready to send out in early July. And that's, that's like Marissa, when Marissa takes over her part of it, when she actually, she publishes it and does her thing, and make sure all the county elements are in there, and it's just done and ready to go. So early July to actually send out the RFP. And if we have ideas to folks that we want to send it to, let me know. Send me an email if you have specific contacts. She said that was okay. To actually send it to individual consultants that we know of and they might have some experience with this.
Don, on the timeline piece, sorry to jump in, but
Yep.
I know we're over time now. The RFP, let's be specific about it. We're close. It's almost done.
Yeah.
You're going to update. I don't know how much time you need to update. Maybe you need a week or so. And then I don't see why it wouldn't take us all, a week or two to provide you final comments. So at least our piece of providing this to the Board of Supervisors is complete, and we're not waiting on one more. Let's take one more look. Like, let's set that final look, and we put that to bed. Of course, the county might choose to make some changes on top of that, but that's once we've given our blessing, then they can move forward with that, and that's not holding it up. Does that sound like a reasonable timeline? We do, try to get this done by the end of June, right? No later.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. That's my goal. End of June, no later than end of June.
Maybe when you send it back around, I know you've got a lot of things going on, but when you send it back around, you can give us a deadline.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll all know to work on that deadline and just get your comments back. And that would be super helpful. And then when we have I'm going to convene another meeting of our greenhouse gas subcommittee, the inventory subcommittee that we've been working on through the Climate Smart Group. And we'll look at those other questions of the other pieces and where they stand, and make sure we're updated on all of the other pieces, the other inventories, community, government operations, and the other land use kind of work that we're hoping to do here.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and as far as the greenhouse
I
gas,
think Brenda's talking, but
Oh.
I'm not sure if he's.
I'm sorry.
Brenda? Okay,
Patrice, does this have to go through home committee? Does an RFP have to go through home committee?
I don't think so.
Okay, because that'll
Well,
save us a month. Yeah. Because the board meeting comes first and then the home committee. So even if we finished in June, if it had to go to committee, we wouldn't get it to committee till mid-June, which means it wouldn't go to the board until July. So just thinking about if we don't have to go to home committee, that's a
Yeah, because I
step
think you don't
ahead.
have to go through internal purchasing and county attorney, that sort of review, but I don't believe the way the resolution is worded for the contract is to prepare any and all necessary documentation in order to expedite that, chairman, authorizing the chairman to sign the contract. So
Okay.
I think we're covered there. If we aren't, then we'll have to take care of it, but I don't think so. I'll verify
So the
that.
only other thing to do then would be to get this to the county attorney before it went to the full board in July.
Well, I would we'll bring it with purchasing, over with her first.
Okay,
and then the county attorney, so that all of our things are in order, and then they can look at the legal aspects of it to see if we've missed something.
okay,
Think-
thank you,
The county attorney would be the last step.
thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Is that a wrap?
That's a wrap for me,
All right.
from my perspective. Thanks, Don,
Yep.
for all the work.
Great, thank you, everybody, for great work.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Take care, bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye.